Hi, I'm Steve Clemens, and I have a question. With the termination of tens of billions of dollars of U.S. aid and humanitarian assistance to Africa and elsewhere around the world, is this going to create waves of tragedy? Let's get to the bottom line. Today, we're talking with Ambassador Adikana Chihombori Kwao, a medical doctor and former permanent representative of the African Union to the United States. Ambassador, it is terrific to have you with me in stage here in studio. Let me just ask you, if I look through the U.S. AID programs, some of which have been cut off, in Congo, there's an aid group, Action Against Hunger. This is they're treating tens of thousands of malnourished children. In Ethiopia, food assistance stopped for more than 1 million people, as we've seen these AID cuts go into force, really across the board with very, very few waivers. How is Africa feeling this moment? Do you see this as a story of tragedy, or is there something else that we need to be looking at?
I think there's something else we need to be looking at. There is need for readjustments. There is need for realignment. We need to understand the real reason why USAID is in Africa. And not just USAID, but other NGOs. You look at DFID, which is the British equivalent, and many other smaller ones. Their sole purpose was to act as if they're coming to rescue Africa. They're coming to fill in the gaps in government services, gaps in education, gaps in healthcare, gaps in humanitarian services. They're coming in the guise of addressing issues to do with human rights, issues to do with environmental protection and social justice. They are coming in claiming that they're introducing grassroots initiatives that are going to help the people. And so they use that as a way to go into the most remote parts of Africa. They're talking about government advocacy. When you look at it on paper, it all looks really good. But they're actually wolf in sheep's clothing. They are using that open access sounding humanitarian to constantly destabilize governments. I can tell you right now, the majority of African leaders, and not just African leaders, but leaders in the developing world, are celebrating the exit of USAID. I was listening to a program, I believe it was CNN, and I was jumping up and down. It was a government official from Hungary. He was echoing the same sentiments. He said they are happy USAID is leaving Hungary because they are always supporting opposition. Their form of government advocacy is supporting whoever can keep the government in a turmoil.
So, Ambassador, let me just jump in here for you. This is a message that I don't think many Americans hear. I think many Americans believe, not all of them, but many of them believe that AID was essentially set up for philanthropic reasons, for dealing with the HIV/AIDS crisis, dealing with the various instabilities in the region, dealing with infrastructure deficits. But you're saying that there was something else as part of that package, meddling.
A major meddling agenda. Major meddling agenda. The majority of some of the workers, now the average USAID worker may not realize it, but quite a few of them are also operatives who are underground. And their major agenda is to destabilize governments, destabilize countries. If you think about it, their sole purpose, for example, filling in the gaps in healthcare and education, where is the change? Show me one country that USAID was in and education improved. Show me what country where USAID was in and healthcare improved. The social services they're bringing, it's peanuts. The American taxpayer needs to know the billions of dollars that are being given to USAID, a fraction is making it to the people.
Look, one of the highest profile medicine programs is PEPFAR, which both Republicans and Democrats here in Washington are really having outcries about. It was one of the signature programs of President George W. Bush to try to respond to the HIV/AIDS epidemic in Africa. What's the view on that front?
Let's look at what HIV/AIDS was used to do. We know of a program that was run out of South Africa where they actually were injecting people with the virus. The reason some of the AIDS virus spread as rapidly as it did in Southern Africa, there were some very dirty games being played on African people. They were using Africans as guinea pigs for experimental activities. Even when you look at every aspect, they're using us as guinea pigs. Yes, there is some good, a percentage of some good, but not all of it is done with good intentions. You look at agriculture, they're destroying African agriculture by introducing those GMOs. You plant your seed in one season, your soil is finished. We used to have seeds that we can use from one season to the other. The introduction of GMOs through these agencies, USAID is one of them. We are destroying Africa in a massive way. A little good is coming out, but by and large, the end result, they mean no good. They can turn around and give us an inventory and say, as long as you have been in Africa, and also other parts of the world, show us your success rate. You claim you are helping governments with education and healthcare. Show us your success rate. But I also turn around and say, African governments, why do you need this little aid to assist you in providing proper healthcare, proper education? The average African government can afford to provide those services for their people.
I happen to have many friends that work for USAID, both in the field but also in Washington. And I have to tell you, I know that they believe that they're doing good, that they're trying to move the needle for those that are in desperate situation and desperate conditions. I think it's very interesting to raise the question of what the other political purposes are. But as you sort of look at the scene now, the French are very big in aid programs. As you mentioned, the British. There are also Chinese aid programs. Are all of these programs essentially power plays? And all of them need to be suspended? How do you see some of the other international programs in Africa now?
Well, these are all underground covert operations. Why does Africa need them? Why do we need them? Africa has been the provider. If you look at Europe, Europe cannot survive without Africa. One situation that people don't realize, post-World War, when the US came up with the Marshall Plan, what they don't tell you is that the contribution through exploitation of African minerals was actually the biggest funder of the European Recovery Plan, ERP, aka the Marshall Plan. US contributed $13 billion, which is now present day $175 billion, which, by the way, the American taxpayer must be paid back. Nobody's asking for that money back. But what they don't tell you is that Africa, through exploitation of its resources by the Europeans, was actually a much bigger contribution to the European recovery post-World War II. Nobody talks about that. Why does such a continent that did so much to help Europe recover continue to be so poor? Let's be realistic here. Let's not talk about peanuts. Africa does not need the aid. What we need is for those who are exploiting Africa to stop. Africa has everything it needs. If Africa could have contributed as much as it did to the recovery of Europe post-World War II, why wasn't Africa equally developed?
So what happens next, Adikana? You and I have talked about this before, and the exploitation of minerals, of uranium, of cobalt, of nickel, et cetera, and many other rare earths, which is apparently very much on President Trump's mind, because we see the negotiation for rare earths with Ukraine. But you and I have talked about the artificially low prices and the fact that many economies in Africa don't participate in the gains and growth of the exploitation of those resources. What happens now when these aid programs are withdrawing? Does the social contract between American mining operations or other global mining operations, does it give an opportunity for the power dynamic to shift and change, and what will that look like?
I think this is a wake-up call for the African leaders. To the same extent that President Trump is saying USA first, African leaders must also say Africa first. This is a wake-up call to the African leaders to take inventory of what is really happening in their countries. Do they really need the peanuts that are coming in as aid? What is really going out? If I may use the example of what happened in Niger, when the government decided they were going to take over the mining of their uranium. The French companies that were mining the uranium were paying the government 80 cents a kilo for the uranium, and then turning around and selling the uranium to the rest of the world at 200 euros a kilo. So that one move from the Nigerian government to say we are now going to take ownership of our own uranium, they went from realizing about $1 billion in uranium resources to over 300 billion a year. Do you realize what I'm talking about? No
Huge.
amount of
Huge.
NGO could bring that kind of money. And this is only one mineral. Now imagine the country taking inventory of all their minerals and benefiting from their natural resources like the rest of the countries in the Western world. That is what African leaders need to look at.
Do you see that in the horizon of African leaders right now?
They're
do
gonna
you
have
see
to.
them? Who do you see as the standout winners of that kind of change? And who do you think is still chasing AID contracts?
Let me tell you, we need to look at what's happening in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. President Traore is standing up. He is saying the natural resources in Burkina Faso, they belong to the people of Burkina Faso. Niger is doing the same thing. Mali is doing the same thing. Every leader must look at what's happening in the Sahel nations to say, like anybody else, you must take care of your people. You have your natural resources. You have everything you need to take care of your people. Why do you continue to be beggars? Look at what is being brought in by not only USAID, but all the NGOs in your country. It's peanuts. It's a joke that the African leaders should continue to be beggars of peanuts when you are looking and allowing billions to get out of your country year in and year out, if not trillions, in natural resources that your people should be benefiting from. It is a wake-up call for African leaders to wake up and say, President Trump is saying, US first, America first. You too must say, your country first, because you have everything it takes. It is a joke. It is embarrassing to see I have not seen any African leader cry over USAID living. I can tell you for a fact, the average African leader privately is celebrating the exit of USAID because they know what is really going on.
Let me ask you a geopolitical question. And again, you and I have had the opportunity on this show to talk about it before, which is the relationship of the United States broadly with the African continent. Now, I realize the continent has a lot of different nations, different countries that are part of it. But President Trump is not known to care much about Africa. He has talked about it in very derogatory language. His comments about USAID have had nothing to do with Africa. They've had to do with downsizing the scale of government and the perception of corruption and policies that are not consistent with his own. He's not framed any of this in terms of African needs or whatnot. So when you think about that, what do you think is the possibility of changing the dynamics of the relationship between the Trump administration and African leaders when it doesn't seem to be on his radar screen?
To be honest with you, why should African leaders care? Why should Trump care about Africa? He shouldn't care about Africa to the same extent that the African leaders really shouldn't care about a relationship either. If the relationship can be worked out, that's wonderful. But if President Trump is saying, I have a mandate from my own people to take care of my people, and I'm doing what I need to do to take care of my people, African leaders need to take that same position. You see, it takes two to tango. If President Trump does not want a relationship with Africa, Africans shouldn't be begging for it. Are you with me?
Do you think this will transmit to the way Africa deals with Europe, with France, with Germany?
I'm hoping that this will translate into African leaders looking from within, because they don't really need to keep looking outside. They have what it takes. It's a wake-up call, just like what happened during COVID. It was a wake-up call for African leaders to realize that you must begin to look within Africa to take care of yourself. When the chips were down, the world walked away from Africa during COVID. So that's a reality. No supplies were coming to Africa. Africans were not manufacturing anything, and African leaders were forced to look from within. This, I'm hoping, is another wake-up call where African leaders also begin to realize we must look from within. But let me underscore this. The average African leader and majority of leaders of developing world, I can tell you, they are celebrating the exit of USAID, and we hope that there will be exits of many other NGOs that are carrying out nefarious activities in Africa and anywhere else in the developing world in order to further the agendas of their governments, which is to continuously destabilize, divide, and conquer.
To be quite candid, Ambassador, much of the world looks at the African continent as a gold mine, as a diamond mine, as a mine for precious materials and resources, which we've talked about. One of those other major powers, rising powers in the world, is China.
Yes.
China has huge stakes, and there's always been the narrative that America is not doing aid very well in Africa, that China is beating us. Bono would come out and say, hey, in all of the refugee camps and whatnot set up in Africa, even the tents say made in China, even though the United States may be providing the support.
Yes.
That there's a lot of both criticism and acclaim for the fact that China has been involved in recent decades in helping Africa develop its infrastructure and whatnot, to position itself better in Africa than the United States and maybe Europe have with regards to resource agreements in Africa. So is China the next villain in the story?
Well, again, my position is Africans must take a position and protect their turf. China wants to come and exploit Africa, they'll get away with it to the extent that Africans allow them. The United States wants to come and exploit Africa, they'll get away with it to the extent that the Africans will allow them. The question is, does Africa have an African position when they come to the negotiating table with the world? The answer right now is no. Africa must unite. Africa must speak with one voice, and Africa must go to the world stage with one voice, one agenda, one plan that the world will have to respond. But as long as Africa is going to the world as bitty little countries, as Togo, as Eswatini, as Guinea-Bissau, Africa is fighting a losing game. Africa must unite, and Africa must speak with one voice. That is the only way a strong, united Africa can take a rightful place on the world stage and be respected and stop the exploitation.
Why is it so hard?
I think it's a long history. If you go back to colonization, if you go back to the Christianity and how it was introduced, how we were trained to be subservient. In Africa, the rules of the game were the same. I think that what was done to brainwash black people around the world, long before they even left Africa, we are still suffering from that legacy of colonization, the legacy of slavery, where the people in power, they themselves don't believe they can do it. We still have leaders who believe you can't make it unless you're working with white people. We have individuals who think only something brought in by white people is what's likely to succeed. With that kind of mentality, it is a very difficult battle. Our battle to succeed, to unite as the African continent, it is a battle of the mind. And each and every African must realize that we are defeated where it matters the most, which is the mind. Brainwashed to the core. Brainwashed to not believe in ourselves and what we can do as individuals. Wherein lies the problem.
I won't call them nationalists, but our continentalists are those that are trying to, as you say, take stock of their situation and raise up Africa and their nations by their own bootstraps to be less dependent on external countries and investment and aid. Is that flavor beginning to take hold? Is that sort of leadership being, is it more and more evident, or do you think you have a big lift ahead?
I think what's happening in the United States through President Trump is going to make them realize that this is what you need to do. You're going to have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. President Trump is saying, I have a mandate, America first. So you Africans, are you going to sit back and just wait and see the next move that President Trump is going to make? Or you're going to also say, I have a mandate from my people, and I'm going to do what I need to do. Take inventory of what you have in your country. Use it and use it wisely. No more begging. You don't need to have anybody filling the gaps in your educational system. You don't need anybody filling the gaps in your healthcare system. You don't need anybody creating initiatives in the most remote parts of your country because they claim that you, the government, cannot have access to that. How can somebody come from all the way from the United States, all the way from Britain, and access the most remote part of your country that you in your country cannot access? It is the most stupid thing. When you listen to the justifications and the explanations as to why they are there, it's a joke, and this needs to stop.
Just finally, Ambassador, when you look at U.S. behavior retracting, We've just got a minute left, but I would love to know from you, what do you think about the UN? What do you think about the International Court of Justice? Because probably the contraction that we're talking about is going to happen in a lot of institutions. Do you worry that Africa will be worse off without those institutions?
No, those institutions were created after the Second World War. United Nations, it took 4 weeks to create the United Nations. Why? In order to help the recovery of Europe. The World Bank, the IMF, it took 3 weeks to create them after the Second World War in order to aid in the recovery of Europe from its own self-implosion and destruction. So no. These institutions were not created to benefit the developing world. To the contrary, they were built to steal from the developing world. Their success is based on the failures of the developing nations where they have been stealing from. So no. We must celebrate what President Trump is doing by exiting the United Nations, by exiting the World Health Organization. We need the U.S. to exit the World Trade Organization because they are doing nothing on the African end. They are giving a blind eye to blatant exploitations, unequal, uneven trade policies that are hurting Africa. You take, for example, cocoa. Majority of the cocoa coming out of the world comes from West Africa, and yet it's only recently that African nations were allowed to add value to their cocoa. The World Trade Organizations, we may have a sister in charge.
Well, Ambassador Arikana Chihombori Kwao, grateful. Whenever I talk to you, it is a new reset for us to hear your very fresh takes on the world. Ambassador Chihombori Kwao, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Steve, as usual, for having me. It's been wonderful. I always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your good work. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. So what's the bottom line? Recently, the former head of the UK's MI6, Sir Alex Younger, gave a very sober assessment of U.S. power in the world and said that we have entered, quote, a new era where international relations aren't determined by rules and by multilateral institutions, but by strongmen and deals. The implications of that, if he's right, are staggering, as it means that institutions like the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, and even alliances like NATO may fade in importance and one day just cease to matter. It means that the transactionalism of programs like the USAID assistance programs designed to both support those in need, but let's be serious, they also deliver power and influence of the United States, may be shut off, at least for a while. I don't know if I fully agree with the argument some are making that this is a golden opportunity.
Welcome back. Hope you have watched the full clip about Dr. Arikana. Dr. Arikana is ours. Dr. Arikana is the champion of Africa unity. She has come out and she wants we African to be champion of unity. We Caribbean, we must be champion of unity across the world. She has come out and she has told us that all Black Arab must now united because it's end time. And guess what? So Dr. Arikana has called out we African leaders and also African to wake up, because as we all know that when Donald Trump came in power, the first thing he did is he deported the migrant back to their countries, and then he ended up and interfering with the health sector, but by suspending this USAID. So USAID is the world organization. This organization has been funding all the African countries and also across the world in terms of healthcare. But Donald Trump came out and stopped this health sector because of what? Now people living with the HIV/AIDS are now suffering. They are now crying. Like in my country, they cried a lot, like asking them question, where are we going? Where are we heading? But when you deep in this organization is really is not really is benefiting these Western countries. As we all know that Mark Rubio is the one who's running this USAID and also the Donald Trump. So this has made some reaction among the African leaders, and some more for Arikana has told us that we African we must develop our own health sector, because this USAID is the one is looting our money from our continent. Is the one who's looting our resources, these people has come out with some regulation about the health sector, about education sector that can benefit them. So she has come out and he has also go and explained that the education sector now in Africa is in dilemma. Education now is really suffering. We have no education that is now working. So she has told us that we must wake up and we must unite so that we build our own education sector. We have these things like the World Health Organization. These things is being run by the United States and it has really affecting us. It has really looted our money from our continent. So Arcana is telling us that we need to do away with this World Health Organization. We need to have African organization so that this organization can help us in fighting of our own freedom. She has also tell us that about the what we call this as in my country they planted what we call GMO. GMO is the killer. They wanted to kill our children. They wanted to kill our farmers because of this GMO, which came from United States. These people are very brave. They came up with a verse in the Bible side when somebody peed in this side, give him this slap in this side, which is very wrong. As we all know that this Bible came from these Western countries. They are the one who wrote this Bible so that they divide us. They are using those verses to humiliate us. They are using these verses to humiliate us so that they gain in, they loot from our resources. So Arikana has come out and has really defending us. He has told us that we need to wake up, we need to unite it so that as we move forward, we don't want to depend from these Western countries. We need to have our own resources. We need to have our own health sector. We need to have our own IMF. IMF bank is the bank which is run by these Western countries. This bank is really giving us a loan which is will pay with a lot of interest. So Arikana has come out and tell us to stop this habit of taking a loan from this World Bank and also the IMF bank. We want to have our own bank. We need to have our own African bank that will benefit the people of Africa. The interest belongs to people of Africa but not the outside the Africa. So she has really advocating for this to happen and she has really tried, and we need to stand with Arikana because she's opening us our eyes. She's telling us the truth, and when somebody the truth will say so. She's warning Donald Trump and Mark Rubio to stop interfering with the people of Africa because we now want to unite it. Thank you so much for watching my video once more. Timothy's Reaction is my name. If you come across for the first time while watching this video, make sure you subscribe and support me. I'm just a local person from Africa and I'm looking forward to impress you. Thank you so much and may God bless you so much. Thank you, and please make sure you subscribe, you support me, you share, like and comment. Bye for now.